I can't believe how quickly our series of lost things is going. These Bible stories from Luke chapter 15 have been so exciting to hear about. I get excited just telling them, and I hope you get excited listening to them. As you know, back on the very first story we had, Jesus was gathered with a crowd of people. Do-gooders, no-gooders, tax collectors and sinners, teachers of the law and Pharisees, each of them not knowing who Jesus loved the most. And I asked the question, who does Jesus love most? Good people or bad people? I'm afraid most of you said good people. Wrong. Remember our memory verse from Luke 19, verse 10? The Bible says Jesus came to seek and save the lost. Yes, that's each of us lost from Jesus because of our sin. He then proceeded to demonstrate that his love was for all lost people, and that is what all of us are, because all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, by telling three parables of lost things: the lost sheep, the lost coin, and today's first part of two stories, the lost son. Well, you remember the lost sheep, one of 99, leaving the flock and going and wandering away, and Jesus, the good shepherd, going out to seek and save that lost sheep, finding that lost sheep maybe in grave danger from being killed by a wild animal. The picture of you and I in grave danger when we're separated from God in sin, of being taken over by the devil himself. But Jesus came to seek and save the lost, and so Jesus, the good shepherd, rescued that lost sheep, threw it on his shoulders. And our second memory verse, as we learned it from Luke 15, verse 6, you'll recall it, the shepherd coming to his home and calling his friends and neighbors and saying, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." Yes, what a terrific story that was. Then the third story, I told about something I lost and compared it to the two verses that come after the story of the lost sheep and then the story of the lost coin, where Jesus says, "In the same way I tell you, there is rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents." And then clarifying it even further by saying in verse 10 that there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of heaven over one sinner who repents. Well, I remember the day when I brought joy to heaven, when I repented of my sin. That means to turn from my sin and to tell God I'm sorry and ask him to forgive me, and to tell God that I believe that Jesus died on the cross to save me. Oh, the joy that filled my heart when my sins were forgiven and I was set free, and I got up from kneeling before my God and Savior, and now live to tell others about him. And I pray that each one of you comes to that sweet place of trusting in Jesus for salvation. Well, that was the parable of the lost sheep. Then last time we had the story of that lost coin, the parable of the lost coin. And yes, I know I'm saying it again. I should be saying not the parable of lost things, the parable of what? Found things, of course. Yes, because each of these things was found when they were lost. The lost sheep was found and the lost coin was found. You remember that poor woman who had just recently got married with that necklace of 10 silver coins around her head, the symbol of love that her husband had given her. And one of those coins was gone. No! She lit a lamp. She swept her floors. She looked behind everything she could find, lifted up the rugs, and finally found it. And what did she do? Oh, well, whatever. I got my lost coin, put it back on there. Okay, whatever. Now, what's next on the agenda? No! She ran out to tell her friends and neighbors. Of course, she had told them when it got lost, "Please pray for me. I lost one of my 10 silver coins." And now, of course, having found it again, she said, "Rejoice with me. I have found my lost coin." Yes, that is Luke 15, verse 9. All right. Well, anyway, right now, we're going to move on to that third story of found things. I didn't do it wrong that time. Yes, but we're going to have to tell this story of a found thing by first of all telling about a lost thing. Only this time it wasn't a thing, it was a lost son. And we read this story in Luke chapter 15, beginning with verse 11. Are you ready? Well, here we go. But just before we go there, let's get one last glimpse of that very happy woman who found her lost coin and called her friends and neighbors to rejoice with her. Well, getting back to our pictures here, Jesus is still talking to this crowd of people, the tax collectors and sinners, the no-gooders, and the teachers of the law and the Pharisees, the do-gooders, and of course the do-gooders muttering under their breath, who does Jesus think he is, that he spends time with these tax collectors and sinners and eats with them? And of course, Jesus just wanted to show that his love was for everyone. And so he told this story, another parable, the third in this same chapter, of a lost son. And it starts like this, verse 11. Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. I only see one son. Let me tell you what happened. You see, of those 2 sons, the younger son, he was a lazy, wretched young man. He didn't like to work, and he resented his father. He was miserable. He was unhappy. He was a troublemaker. And one day he came to his father and he said, hey, Pops, how about you give me half of everything that I got coming, half of everything you have, what I got coming to me when you die someday? Well, that sure took some nerve. And what do you suppose that father did? Well, I can tell you what I might have done if one of my sons had come to me and said something like that. Talk about an insult. I'm not even dead yet. And you're asking for half of my money before I die? Are you serious? I probably would have taken my son and brought them to a place where they might not have enjoyed it so much. Given them a time out or depending how old they were, have tried to find a punishment that would hurt and make them realize how bad what they had done to me was. But you see, just like the other 2 parables, we're not talking about a human shepherd. We're not talking about a situation, where it's just a woman who had 10 silver coins. We're talking about God himself. And this father is a picture of God. So what did this father do when that whippersnapper son of his came to him and said, hey, Dad, how about you give me half of all you have? Because after all, you're going to die someday and I'll get it then. So why not give it to me now? You know what that father did? He went and got half of all he had. He put it in a bag and he gave it to that resentful son. And you know what that son did? He threw that bag of money over his shoulders and said, "Yee-haw! I am free. I'm out of here. No more rules. No more, you got to do this, you got to do that. You can't do this, you can't do that. Yee-hoo! I am free." And he went as far away from his home as his feet would carry him. Yes, he went to a far-off country. And when he arrived in that faraway place, it didn't take long until he was flashing his money around for everyone to see that he had friends. Lots of them. I mean, it was like bees to honey. Bzzz. Because anyone with money, and he was flashing around, he'd say, "Hey, you want to be my friend? I'm having a party at my house tonight. Come on down and we'll have a good time. And you don't have to bring anything. It's all on me. We'll get drunk. We'll get high. We'll get some girls over there and we'll have a party. We'll celebrate." Not a birthday party. We're talking an evil, wicked party. And that's what happened. Night after night, the same thing. He'd gather his new friends to his house. He'd spend all his money wasting it on wild living, getting drunk, getting high, and doing all these terrible things. And as you can imagine, he was everybody's friend. Yes, people loved him. Well, at least the people his age. The adults looking on weren't quite so sure. And then after a period of time, and we don't even know how long it took, but as you can imagine, throwing his money away like he was, it probably didn't last very long, even though it was half of what his father had. Even though he had taken all that money to this faraway place and now squandered it, wasted it on wild living. Well, one day as he was about to plan for his next party, he went to that sack of money that he had, and as he reached his hand inside, something didn't seem just right. Normally when he would grab his bag of money, it was ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. He heard the sound of all that wonderful money in there. But now, looking inside his money bag, yipes! His money was gone. No problem, he thought to himself. I mean, after all, look at all I've done for my friends. I've had a party for them every night. Since I've done all those things for them, surely now they can help me. And so he waited a little while, but then he got to be a little desperate. So he went to a couple of his friends and he said, excuse me, I was just wondering if maybe you could spare me some change. You see, I'm a little low on cash right now, and I'm kind of hungry, and could you just spare a little bit of money for me to... And you know what those friends of his did? They looked at him like he was from Mars, and they said, huh? We don't know you. Get lost. Leave us alone. What? Yes, those very same people, his very friends, who night after night would come to his house, who he would squander all his money on, partying and getting drunk and getting high with, and all the things they did at that wild, evil, wicked parties that they would have night after night, now pretended they didn't even know him. That's not fair. It's not fair. But boys and girls, that's life. And if that's the kind of friends you choose, and if that's the kind of things you do to make friends, you can be sure it's going to come back to bite you. And it did. And now he began to be in need. Because if that wasn't bad enough, now that he didn't have any money left, guess what happened? There was a famine. And a famine, of course, is when it stops raining and farmers can't grow things out in their field. So all the food that we get from a harvest that comes about when rains fall and everything's plenty, there was no food to be found. And what little food there was cost a fortune. And here's this boy who had had everything. I mean, he had everything. Now living in this faraway land with nothing. He came to realize for the first time in his life, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to get a... He couldn't even say the word. I'm going to have to get a job. And so he hired himself out. He knocked on doors and pleaded with anyone to give him a job. But of course, you can be sure as people opened their door and saw him standing there, they probably said, aren't you that kid that came to town a few weeks back? Aren't you the one who's that troublemaker, having parties every night, getting all our sons and daughters doing wild things and getting drunk and high? You think I'm going to hire the likes of you? No possible way. Yes, this boy had a reputation. No one wanted to hire him. But finally, he found a job. Oh, man, he got a job. Well, I don't want you farmers out there to be offended with me because I grew up on a farm too. In fact, the farm that I grew up on had lots of these animals. And yes, I love my bacon and I love pork chops and I love barbecued ribs. He got a job feeding pigs, slopping the hogs. Every day, he'd bring the garbage and the trash and the slop out to the hogs, and throw it to those greedy, selfish pigs. If you've never fed pigs before, you don't really know what I'm talking about, because those pigs at the sight of food, they devour it as fast as they selfishly can, and they squeal and they fight and they bite and they do all kinds of nasty things. Oh, they're nasty creatures. But that was his job. And one day, as he's bringing out this slop to the hogs, he throws it over the fence, and what did he see? He saw something that actually looked good. A pot of food that he thought, I could eat that. And he snatched it before the pig did. And he's lifting it to his mouth and he's going, what have I become? He went over and sat down under a tree. And as he sat down under that tree, looking off at the distance at those pigs greedily devouring and selfishly eating the slop that he had brought out to them, he thought to himself and said, you know what? I'm no different than they are. I'm a selfish, greedy pig. Oh, what have I become? And then he started thinking back to his home. And he said to himself, you know, back home, even my father's slaves had more than enough to eat. And here I am, starving to death. I know what I'll do. I'll get up and I'll go back to my father. I'll say, Father, I've sinned against heaven. I've sinned against you. I don't deserve to be called your son anymore. Just let me be one of your slaves. That's what I'll do. And so he got up and he left that pig pen. Man, he smelled like a hog. His clothes were filthy. He didn't have any shoes. He was still starving to death. He had nothing. But he started the long walk home. And let me tell you about that long walk home. The walk home was a lot longer than the walk he had taken to come out to that faraway country. You say, huh? It was the same. Oh, no. No, the path into sin is always fast and easy. The path out of sin is hard. You see, that's what sin does to us. Sin will always take us further than we want to go. It will always keep us longer than we want to stay. And it will always cost us more than we want to pay. So that walk home was long because he had nothing. His feet were sore and his robe was filthy dirty, and he probably had to sleep in the ditch at nighttime and shiver in the cold. But finally, he saw it. Off in the distance, he saw home! Home at last! He almost was ready to run, and then he waited. What would his father do when he saw his good-for-nothing, wayward son? Would he welcome his son back home again? I'd sure love to tell you, but we've run out of time. Oh, man! But I'll tell you what, if you come back next time, you'll hear the rest of the story of the lost son. Now, wait a minute. We've been calling these stories lost things or found things. Come back next time and find out. Luke 19 verse 10 says, Jesus came to seek and save the lost. Remember what happened with the lost sheep. Remember what happened with the lost coin. I wonder if that's what's going to happen to this lost son. Do you suppose? Come back next time and we'll find out, okay? Until next time, we'll see you then. Bye-bye.